Phil Mickelson had money. Everyone knows that. But something strange is happening behind the scenes, and his closest friends are finally talking. For years, people believed Phil was one of the richest players in golf history. That part is true, but new reports show a very different picture. One filled with secret losses, hard choices, and numbers most fans have never heard before. Something changed, and it did not happen overnight. Close friends, people who trusted Phil for decades, are now speaking up. What they reveal is not simple gossip. It comes with real records, real numbers, and real consequences. Some of it will shock even his biggest supporters. Here is the strange part. Phil still looks successful in public. He still smiles at tournaments. He still signs autographs like nothing is wrong. But behind that image, sources say the truth is far more complicated. So what actually happened to his fortune? Was it one bad decision, or years of hidden trouble finally catching up? And why are his own friends the ones exposing it now? One answer starts with a man Phil trusted more than almost anyone else in his life. That man is Billy Walters, and for years, he was one of Phil's closest confidants. Walters built his reputation as one of the most successful professional gamblers in American history. He understood risk better than almost anyone alive. For a long stretch of time, he and Phil were tight. They talked often. They trusted each other with things most people never share. Walters was not some distant acquaintance. He was inside the circle, close enough to know things the public never saw, close enough to be trusted with secrets Phil never told reporters. That trust is exactly why this story matters so much now. Because when someone that close finally decides to speak, it carries weight nobody can ignore. This is not a tabloid rumor pieced together from anonymous sources. This is someone who was actually there. Someone who watched things unfold up close. Someone who kept receipts most people never even knew existed. Betting slips, phone records, details that only someone truly inside the relationship could ever produce. So why would Walters break that silence after all these years? Friendships like theirs do not end quietly, and secrets like this do not surface without a reason. Whatever happened between them, it was serious enough to end the friendship completely. And once that friendship ended, so did his reason to stay quiet. What Walters chose to reveal did not stay hidden for long. It spread fast, and it forced people to rethink everything they assumed about Phil's fortune. Most fans still get this part wrong. They assume this is just about one bad habit, one reckless mistake made on a random weekend. It is not that simple. This was not a phase. This was a pattern that lasted for decades, hidden in plain sight, while Phil kept winning tournaments and signing sponsorship deals in front of the entire world. Think about that contrast for a moment. On television, he was calm, confident, smiling for cameras after every round. Behind closed doors, according to Walters, an entirely different story was playing out, one built on risk, pressure, and numbers that most people could never imagine carrying quietly for so long. The real numbers behind this story are almost impossible to believe. Over 3 decades, Phil placed more than $1 billion in bets. Read that again? Not a million, $1 billion. And according to the records Walters revealed, the losses from that betting reached close to $100 million. That is not pocket change lost on a bad weekend in Vegas. That is a fortune large enough to change the course of an entire life, large enough to make even wealthy people nervous just thinking about it. In just 1 year alone, 2011, Phil placed over 3,000 bets. That works out to nearly 9 bets every single day for an entire year. Weekdays, weekends, here tournament days. It did not stop. Imagine trying to focus on a championship round while carrying that kind of weight quietly in the background, smiling for the cameras while numbers like that piled up behind the scenes. But the betting itself was never the part that scared people closest to him. It was what came after. Word started spreading that Phil's gambling had crossed into something far more dangerous than card games or sports bets. Some reports point to offshore accounts and high-risk moves that most professional athletes would never dare to touch. The kind of financial exposure that could end careers, damage reputations, and quietly drain a fortune built over decades of hard work on the course. Once money starts moving through channels like that, it becomes much harder to track, much harder to control, and much harder to walk away from, even for someone as disciplined as Phil appeared to be on the course. And that discipline is exactly what made the story so hard for fans to accept at first. This was not a young rookie making careless choices early in his career. This was a grown man, a champion, someone who had already proven he could handle pressure better than almost anyone in the sport. That is part of why, when the details finally surfaced, so many people struggled to reconcile the calm figure they watched on Sunday afternoons with the high-stakes world Walters described behind closed doors. Other players in the locker room reportedly had no idea how deep it ran either. Golf is a sport built on quiet discipline and controlled emotion, which made it almost impossible for outsiders to guess what was happening beneath the surface. That silence is part of what makes this story land so hard now. For years, nobody saw it coming. Please, before we continue, do me a quick favor. I want your honest opinion on this. Do you think Phil's financial struggles were avoidable, or was this always going to catch up with him eventually? Drop your thoughts below. I read every comment. Now here is where it gets even more interesting, because Phil has actually spoken about this himself. In one interview, he admitted his gambling reached a point that was reckless and embarrassing. He said he had to address it, and that he had been working on it for years. Those are not the words of someone hiding from the truth. They are the words of someone who knew exactly how bad things had gotten, and who finally decided to say so out loud, in public, on record, in front of an audience that had trusted him for decades. But then Phil added something else. He said his family had been financially secure for a long time. On the surface, that sounds reassuring, almost like closure, like the story ends there, safely, with everything under control, no further questions needed. It is the kind of statement designed to close a chapter quickly and quietly. Except the numbers that came out afterward tell a very different, much messier story. Because right now, in 2026, nobody can even agree on how much Phil Mickelson is actually worth. Some financial outlets place his current net worth around $300 million. Others, factoring in his massive LIV golf contract, his course earnings, and his business ventures, estimate his fortune closer to $550 or even $600 million. That is a gap of hundreds of millions of dollars between two respected sources. About the same man, not a rounding error. Not a small disagreement, a gap wide enough to swallow entire companies whole. Think about that for a second. When people cannot even agree if you have 300 million or 600 million, something about the full picture is being hidden, guessed, or quietly reshaped behind closed doors. And that uncertainty alone is enough to fuel a story like this one, because uncertainty always invites more questions than answers, and questions like these do not stay quiet for long. Part of that confusion comes from how complicated Phil's income actually is. His LIV golf deal alone reportedly included a signing bonus worth well over $100 million, separate from tournament winnings, appearance fees, and endorsement deals that stack on top of everything else. When that many income streams overlap, and when gambling losses are quietly subtracted somewhere in the background, even financial experts struggle to land on one clear number. Add to that years of private investments, real estate moves, and business ventures that rarely make headlines, and it becomes even easier to understand why two respected outlets can look at the same man and land on numbers that differ by hundreds of millions of dollars. Some analysts even argue that Phil himself may not know the exact total anymore, not with that many moving pieces spread across so many different ventures and accounts. But the biggest question here is not what happened in the past, it is what happens next. Because right now, in 2026, Phil is facing a threat that has nothing to do with old gambling records. It is about the future of his biggest paycheck. Reports say the Saudi backers funding LIV Golf are planning to stop supporting the tour financially after this season ends. If that happens, one of the largest income sources in Phil's entire career could simply disappear, almost overnight, with very little warning for the players depending on it. Think about what that means. A man already dealing with years of gambling losses is now facing the possible loss of his biggest current source of income, all at the same time. That is not old news resurfacing to fill a slow news week. That is a brand new financial cliff, forming right now, in real time, while cameras are still pointed at him every single week, while fans are still watching his every move on the course. And if that funding really does disappear, the question becomes even bigger. What replaces it? Sponsorship deals take years to build. Tournament winnings alone, especially at this stage of his career, could never come close to matching what LIV was paying. For the first time in a long time, Phil may be staring at a future where his income does not simply shrink, it collapses. Other LIV players are reportedly asking the exact same question behind closed doors, worried about what comes next for the entire tour, not just for Phil, but for a player already carrying the financial weight Phil has carried for decades. That uncertainty hits differently. It is not just a career question anymore, it is a survival question. And unlike younger players on the tour, Phil does not have 20 more years of prime earning ahead of him to recover if this income stream disappears for good. And it gets worse. Because money is not the only thing collapsing around Phil this year. His reputation is falling apart right alongside it. For the first time in his entire professional career, Phil is missing all 4 major tournaments in 2026. Think about that. A legend of the sport, absent from the biggest stages in golf, all in the same year his finances are already under pressure. That timing is not a coincidence fans are willing to ignore, and it has only added fuel to a story that was already spreading fast across golf media. On top of that, investigative reports have detailed serious misconduct allegations connected to Phil. Since 2021, he has suddenly left or been removed from 3 different golf clubs. One termination reportedly came after an incident involving a female employee at a club in San Diego County. These are not small stories. These are the kind of headlines that damage sponsorship deals, business relationships, and the trust of fans who supported him for decades, all while the financial questions keep piling up in the background, one after another, with no sign of slowing down. Sponsors do not like uncertainty. Business partners do not like headlines like these. And when a financial storm and a reputation storm hit at the exact same time, the damage does not simply add up. It multiplies, making each problem harder to manage than it would have been on its own. Fans who once defended Phil without hesitation are now split. Some argue he deserves privacy after decades in the spotlight. Others say a man with this much influence over the game owes the public more honesty than he has given so far. That divide alone shows how much trust has shifted in just the last year. So picture the full situation now. A gambling history worth nearly $100 million in losses. A conflicting net worth that nobody can pin down. A major paycheck from LIV Golf that might vanish within months. And a reputation crisis unfolding at the exact same time. All of it landing on Phil Mickelson in a single, brutal year. So here is the honest answer to the question you clicked to find out. Is Phil Mickelson in complete financial freefall? Not exactly. He is not broke. He still holds one of the largest fortunes in golf history, built across decades at the top of his sport. But calling this situation stable would be dishonest too, and anyone telling you it's simple is not telling you the full story. The truth sits somewhere in the middle, and that middle ground is far more serious than most people realize. A man who earned over $1 billion across his career kept only a fraction of that fortune, largely because of a documented gambling addiction exposed by someone who once called him a friend. And now, in 2026, he faces a genuine, forward-looking financial risk, right as his public reputation takes hit after hit, week after week, with no clear end in sight and no easy way out. That is not clickbait. That is not exaggeration. That is simply where Phil Mickelson stands right now, at one of the most uncertain points of his entire career, with 2 crises colliding at the exact same moment, in front of an audience that is still watching closely. What happens if LIV Golf really does pull its funding after this season? Will Phil's finances hold steady, or will this become the real freefall everyone has been talking about? Nobody knows yet, not even the people closest to him, and that uncertainty is exactly why this story is not going away anytime soon. So tell me, do you think Phil Mickelson bounces back from this, or is the damage already done? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more honest, deeply researched stories like this one, straight from the world of golf, make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss the next one.